Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Ashley Sherrard and I'm CEO of the Lenexa Chamber of Commerce, and it's my honor to moderate today's forum featuring our Lenexa City Council Ward 4 candidates. On behalf of the Lenexa Chamber and the Johnson County Public Policy Council, which is a collaboration of the 10 area local chambers of commerce, thank you for joining us. I'd like to begin by sharing the format for our forum this afternoon, which will include 2-minute opening statements by the candidates, a moderated question and answer period during which candidates will each have 1.5 minutes to respond, followed at the end by 1-minute closing statements. The format, questions, and time limits will be the same for both candidates, and there will be no follow-up questions, formal rebuttal time, or audience participation. The candidate speaking order has been randomly determined with the candidates in advance and will rotate throughout the program. And with that, let's begin. I'll first briefly introduce our candidates in alphabetical order with a reminder that this is a nonpartisan race. Candidate Michael Elliott is a state-certified commercial and residential real estate appraiser and operates a small business based in Lenexa. He's a graduate of Wichita State University and completed the Johnson County Citizens Academy. In addition to his business and family responsibilities, Michael has served on the boards of local professional organizations and volunteers at local nonprofits and his church. You can learn more about Michael's background and civic involvement at his website, www.elliottforlenexa.com. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
Candidate Christopher Herron has served a variety of roles in the energy industry focused on finance, project development, and corporate management. He is a graduate of Dartmouth College and Southern Methodist University. Chris has volunteered and served on the boards of several nonprofit organizations and completed the Leadership Palm Beach County program while he was based in Florida. You can learn more about Chris's background and civic involvement at his website, www.herronforlenexa.com. And welcome to you, Chris.
Thank you. Good to be here.
With that, let's begin with our opening statements. As a reminder, candidates will have 2 minutes each to present opening statements. We'll start with Chris. Chris?
Thank you. My name is Chris Herron. I am running for Lenexa City Council Ward 4. It's an honor to be here. I think we find ourselves at an inflection point that requires the voters to think about not just the next short term, but the long-term trajectory of Lenexa. And I believe I am uniquely suited to be a part of guiding the city towards more prosperity and success. So this will be the first time in 20 years that Lenexa will be selecting a mayor. Also, there's a big Panasonic battery development which portends lots of economic development and probably some population growth. And so there are also some externalities that will have to inform the decisions that were made. So a little bit more about my background. What I believe that I bring are experience and skills and knowledge and perspective that will allow me to take in a lot of different viewpoints, consider a lot of different alternatives, work with the council, work with the community to figure out kind of the best way for us to move forward, and then we make a decision and support our staff in execution of that vision. And so I appreciate the opportunity to have you learn a little bit about me. Thank you.
Michael?
All right, well, first, thank you, Ashley, and the Chamber for hosting this event. As it was mentioned in my bio, I've lived in Johnson County most of my life, and Lenexa for about 20 years. Went to Shawnee Mission Schools, raised my family here, proud grandfather now. I've been invested in this community. I run a small business here in Lenexa. I'm a state certified real estate appraiser, and I've been doing that for 25 years. We're very involved in our community, everything from the Lenexa Chili Challenge to the Community Days Parade and playing in the Lenexa Community Orchestra. This is my home, and I want to see it succeed. I decided to run for City Council for 3 primary reasons. One, I believe we need a voice for the taxpayer, somebody that has a small business sense and understands the importance of taxes to small businesses. Number 2, I think we need to focus on public safety. Property crime is increasing on a regional basis. Lenexa has some great highway access, but we need to make sure that that's not going to make us a target, and really focus in on those issues. And third, and most important, I think we need some new thinking when it comes to the city budget. We need to apply some business sense to the way that Lenexa operates. Ideas like zero-based budgeting, not just continual increases year after year after year. I think my combination of both business experience and my commitment to this community over the long term and my involvement in this community make me the right candidate for this responsibility. So look forward to answering some questions.
All right, thank you both. Let's move on to our moderated question and answer. As a reminder, candidates will have 1.5 minutes each to respond, and the speaking order will rotate with each question. So for question number 1, Michael, you will be the first one to respond. Can you please tell us more about what your top 3 policy goals would be as a Lenexa City Council member?
Well, as I had mentioned in my intro, the top 3 policy goals I had would, of course, be public safety. I think it's not enough of, obviously, everybody wants to support our first responders with the right resources, but we need to focus on specific things that make our Lenexa neighborhoods livable. Property crime, theft, speeding, and number 2, taxes. Even in years when property values are going up, we need to look at the mill levy. And 3, looking at a responsible budget. There's more things that we can do to make sure that we can still provide the great city services, but be careful of what we're doing with taxes.
Thank you, Michael. And Chris?
My top priorities are increasing the number of houses that are attainable, no matter where someone is in their life. Economic development, making sure that we as a community set expectations for the type of companies that we wish to have in our community, because the commercial base is kind of the secret sauce of what allows us to keep our residential millage rates lower, and they've decreased over time. And so the more we can do to make that a possibility, the better. Plus those high-paying jobs and brings young families here, which means we will have a stronger and more diverse economy. The other big thing is infrastructure, especially as we grow. It will be important for us to make the correct decision so that we do continue to provide all the necessary services for a great community, such as roads, bridge, more green space.
All right, let's move on to question number 2. And for this question, Chris, you will go first. What are your views on the services and value the city's citizens receive for their local tax dollars?
I think that what the citizens get, and I'm not exact on this number, but it's around $150 a month, give or take. And it gets a lot of things that are visible, parks, trails, so forth, the festivals and whatnot. But it also is in some of the things I hope a lot of people don't have to experience, such as police and fire response, and the general idea of what Lenexa is. And so while things will evolve, our community will grow, we might have different needs, there's a core value here that we should be working to protect, which is make Lenexa or keep Lenexa.
Thank you, Chris. And Michael, what are your views on the services and value the city's citizens receive for their local tax dollars?
Well, as I mentioned, I love living in Lenexa. I think it's a great livable place to work, and I think we have great city services. I think our Parks Department, most of our city departments do a great job. That doesn't mean there's not room for improvement. As I mentioned, we need to look carefully at every bit of tax dollars that we spend to make sure that we can continue to provide those great services going forward into the future. And I think that also involves making sure we have budget neutrality in years when we have great property value increases. Doesn't mean that we can just keep spending and spending and spending if we're going to keep this up from year after year.
Thank you both. Let's move on to question number 3. For this question, Michael, you will go first. What changes, if any, would you like to see in the city budget?
Well, as I mentioned just briefly in my opening statement, I'd like to see us go to zero-based budgeting. I think we need to do what businesses do on the city budget. We need to look at everything and not just wave off a percentage increase every year. We need to look at what is really necessary to provide those services. Are we really doing what we need to do for each department to keep that up every single year? I think that's the most important thing, is that Lenexa operate a little bit more like a business, like the rest of us have to. I'm a small business owner, and I can't afford to operate like some governments do in my business, and I think we'd be wise to put a little bit of that sense into what we do at the city government.
And Chris, what changes, if any, would you like to see to the city budget?
I think right now that the budget is appropriate. Over the past 6 years, the mill rate has actually gone down, but property taxes have gone up just from the simple math. I work hard for my money, and I know other voters do too, and I don't like to pay taxes any more than they do. However, there are things that we have to remain vigilant about. For example, staff salaries. I would like for us to have salaries that support firemen and the police and our staff to actually live here in Lenexa. And that might be a stretch. And so making sure that we recognize their hard work, recognize the value that they create for us is important. There are some things in the budget that I would like to review with an eye towards perhaps even trying to increase it, such as the things that we can do to provide some property tax relief for folks, make sure that we're not overlooking development possibilities in our ward, especially Old Town. And so right now I would say let's just be prudent and continue to review, but always with an eye towards being responsible stewards for our citizens' money.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to question number 4. And for this, Chris, you will be the first to respond.
Okay.
What role, if any, do you believe the city should play in economic development to bring jobs and capital investment to the community?
I think the city should have a very active and proactive role in bringing companies here. Something like Panasonic just doesn't happen because Panasonic just looked at a map and put a finger down and go like, yeah, we're going to go there. The things that are important is that we have all of the infrastructure that can attract not just companies but families that come here, and we have a lot of that, but also with an eye towards the future, the capability of delivering on those services, and that might mean as far as transportation, as far as housing, and the other services that we will have to provide. So if the city is not involved, I don't think it happens at the same pace, and it might not happen in such a way that benefits the most folks.
And Michael, to you, what role, if any, do you believe the city should play in economic development?
Well, obviously, the city needs to be involved when it comes to attracting large companies. The best determination of what development needs to happen, obviously, is the free market, not the government. But I think we need to make sure as well that we're careful that we balance growth. All this growth that Lenexa has experienced and all its success is great, but it's really important that we make sure that the parts of the city, like where I live in Ward 4, are not left behind as we look towards redevelopment and some of the things that need to be done in the older parts of the city. You can't have a great Lenexa unless you have a great all of Lenexa, I believe. I was a participant on the Citizens Task Force for Lenexa Vision 2040, and I believe that is a great example of what we can do as a city government to make sure that planning and development and zoning, those important guardrails, are the kinds of things that government does best, and the role that it needs to take on as far as development.
Thank you both. Let's move on to question number 5. As the city considers future development and redevelopment projects, describe your views on how the city should best manage and balance growth. And Michael, you will answer that question first.
Well, as I had just mentioned in the previous question, I think that it's very important that we be careful that although we've had great success in Western Lenexa, Lenexa is going to be built out the next few years, and the development that we have is the development that we're going to be stuck with. So we need to be very cautious as we do that. And at the same time, there's going to be redevelopment going on in the older parts of the city. And I think it's important that as we pick and choose what's going on there, that we attract through the zoning process and the planning process the right kind of development. And again, I believe the city needs a little bit of a hands-off approach. It's not the city's role or the city government's job to determine what people do with their property. It's the city's job to plan and make sure it's good for everyone. But the city does not need to micromanage everything. That never turns out well when a government entity gets in and tries to micromanage the economy.
And Chris, to you, can you please describe your views on how the city should best manage and balance growth?
Well, let's start with the comprehensive plan. I think the foundations of that document, based on contributions from the staff, the council, citizens, I think it's a really good document that lays out a path towards the future. I do agree that the city shouldn't pick winners and losers. There should be some strong elements of the market determining what we do. However, that doesn't mean that we just have a complete laissez-faire, just do whatever you want to do approach, I think, especially towards achieving some of the other goals that we need to accomplish, such as more attainable housing. And so making our vision known for the community, I think, is what the voters are in essence hiring us to do, so that the decisions that we do make are ones that provide the most opportunity for us to have sustainable development and sustainable growth. And so regardless of what that number ultimately is, if it's 80,000 folks or 100,000 folks, it's really critical that we build a resiliency into our budget and our economic development and infrastructure, so that we can handle no matter anything that comes up that we run into.
Thank you. Let's go to question number 6. And for this, Chris, you will answer first.
Okay.
What is your philosophy on the role the city should play in terms of metro area issues?
Well, for metro area issues, I think we should determine, first of all, what's right and what's best for the citizens of Lenexa. And then, we should seek consensus from, the leadership of other cities. But make no mistake, lead, follow, or get out of the way, because what the voters are sending us to do is to look at all the factors that go into determining, how we live, where we live, and the things that affect us. And so we should partner where we should partner, such as crime prevention. We can share resources, transportation, develop infrastructure. That's going to be critical. And I think we can do that without being adversarial or saying, it's our way or the highway. But it's critically important that we as council people listen to the needs of our citizens and then incorporate that into our thinking to set countywide policies.
Thank you. And to Michael, what's your philosophy on the role the city should play in terms of metro area issues?
Well, Lenexa is the 9th largest city in Kansas, so obviously we need to be sure that we're looking at our region. We're not in isolation. As I said earlier, we're a very centralized city with great highway access. Everything we do in Lenexa generally has something to do with one of our neighbor cities, especially as we get built out. I don't think anybody would disagree that what we need to do at the end of the day, the calculation needs to be what's good for Lenexa. That's what the citizens are voting us into office for, is to determine what's good for Lenexa. We can obviously partner on certain things, but I think we need to be careful as far as following a trend, whether it's just some fad in terms of housing or transportation, that we really look back at what it does to Lenexa, how it's going to impact Lenexa long term.
Thank you both. We are going to move on to question number 7. And Michael, you will be the first one to answer this question. What do you believe are the greatest challenges the city faces over the next 10 years, and how would you address them?
Well, I think a couple of the big challenges we have, obviously, we've talked a lot about development. The city's going to be built out in the next few years, and I think it's very important at this point in our city's history that we take a look at what we're building, how things are being built, and we plan that very carefully because that's what we're going to be stuck with. I think it's also a challenge right now in today's environment that we don't get bogged down in national political issues at the City Council. I think bringing in all these outside extraneous issues that have nothing to do with the good job that a City Council needs to do are just a distraction, and they're going to make for poor decisions. Third, I think especially again in Ward 4, we're an older part of the city. I think dealing with both an older part of the city and balancing that against the growth in the new part of the city and making sure that we bring the whole city along together is going to be one of the biggest challenges on a city like this.
And to you, Chris, what do you believe are the greatest challenges the city faces over the next 10 years, and how would you address them?
Some of the biggest challenges are going to be how to actually, handle the new folks coming here. There's going to be a need for more attainable housing, and I think the comprehensive plan has the potential for the market to respond and build houses. And so it's my hope that developers take it into consideration that not everyone can afford a $600,000, $700,000 home. But with that being said, though, supply and demand, but there's also opportunities to accommodate other folks at different places in their lives. It's going to be critically important that we build resiliency into our infrastructure. So for example, we should be concerned about water. We should be concerned about the impact, the negative health impacts of a warming climate. And so those are some intangible things, but we also just don't move too significantly far away from the documents we referred to earlier as, these are the guideposts that our community has set, and there's obviously some variance to that we can take, but I would take the comprehensive guide and Vision 2040 as my guide.
All right, and moving on to question number 8, our final question during this portion of the forum. Chris, you will answer this question first. What do you believe makes you uniquely qualified to serve in this position and most distinguishes you from your opponent in this race?
I think what distinguishes me is the broad life experiences, broad work experiences, the skills and ability that I've picked up in professional life. I think one of my strengths is being able to connect with people, understand their perspective, whether I agree with it or not. I am certainly willing to have my mind changed after discussion, and so being able to apply that learning, take very complex issues, break it down into smaller sizes to be able to communicate to the citizen what it is we're doing, what the crux of the matter is, and how we get it done. Like throughout my professional life, I've had several significant strategic roles, and that requires understanding the big picture. And the big picture isn't everything, but you've got to be able to start with, here's the situation we find ourselves in, and be able to drill down to the essence, have that discussion with key stakeholders, make a decision, and figure out the best way to move forward. And that's what I've been very good at.
And Michael, to you, what do you believe makes you uniquely qualified to serve in this position and most distinguishes you from your opponent in this race?
Well, I think first of all, as I mentioned, I've lived here most of my life. I'm involved in Lenexa. I'm committed to Lenexa. This is my home. And I think it's very important if you're going to be in a leadership position that you've been here, that you understand Lenexa. I'm also a small business owner, and I think that's really important in this position. I think somebody needs to give a voice to people that run small businesses and the challenges of small businesses. It's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to actually be responsible for a business and be responsible for employees on a day in and day out basis. And you know, as a father and a grandfather, I want to see future generations enjoy the great Lenexa that we've gotten right now.
All right, we're going to move on to closing statements. As a reminder, candidates will now have 1 minute each to present closing statements, and those will be given in the reverse order of opening statements. So that means, Michael, you're going to give a closing statement first.
Well, again, thank you for having us today, and hopefully we've shed some light on our views. As I mentioned, this is a critical time in our city. I think it's important that we have the right leadership going forward. Somebody that understands our city, somebody that understands what it takes to run a business, what it takes to live here and be committed for a long time to this city, and understand all the dynamics that are going on both in our city and in our region. Somebody that is committed to making sure that in the future that future generations are going to enjoy everything that we love about Lenexa.
And Chris, your 1 minute closing statement.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. You know, I love Lenexa. I got here as fast as I could. What I believe that I bring is a fresh perspective. I've got a lot of years under me, and I can say that without a doubt, my commitment to Lenexa is unwavering. I see nothing but tremendous potential here in its people, in its businesses, that I want to be part of it, frankly. And so this opportunity to say, here's what I have to offer, is my way of participating in our community and in our democracy. And so our democracy is only as good as the people who are willing to commit to it, to spend their time to get out, meet people, and do the things that say, you know, Lenexa, we are going to make it all together. We're going to move forward together.
All right, thank you. That concludes our Lenexa City Council Ward 4 Forum. Let's thank our candidates for participating in today's program. Now, on behalf of the Lenexa Chamber of Commerce and our colleague local chambers, thank you for taking advantage of this important opportunity to help us learn about the candidates. For more information about candidates, videos of candidate forums, and advanced voting details, visit www.votejoco.com, and please share this voter resource with your colleagues, family, and friends. Thank you all again for joining us.